we kind of have to talk about the NBA draft lottery. I'm just going to go through my biggest questions that I have or things to watch post lottery to see what happens leading into the draft or after it, given the order that happened. Quick shout out to that Phoenix Suns Los Angeles Clippers game in game 2, aside from the replays, which took 30 minutes to finish the final 90 seconds of the game. It was a riveting performance. That inbounds play that won the Suns the game. Holy crap. Series is fantastic. Excited to continue watching it. Looks like CP3 is going to come back in game 3 as well. This feels like the Suns are really going to win. I know the Clippers have already erased a pair of 2-0 deficits, but they're probably not going to get Kawhi Leonard back, so I don't really know what the path is for them winning if CP3 returns, and then if they're not going to get Kawhi and you're at a point where Reggie Jackson or Nick Batum or Marcus Morris or Luke Kennard has to be like your second and third best player on any given night behind Paul George, who continues to make a meme of himself after missing 2 clutch free throws in a row during game 2. That's not why we're here, though, to talk about that series. We'll delve in deeper during our locker room session, probably on this Sunday. We are moving the schedule based around the games, so we'll take a look at that, and we'll always have the promo tweets on Twitter. Come, join us for Locker Room. It's a good time. We have a few reoccurring listeners who come, roll through the last questions in the chat. They'll come on and speak. It helps us out a lot when you guys come join us live, and then you can download and listen to it again later, or at least just download it to juice those numbers. If this is your first time listening, please rate, review, subscribe to Hardwood Knocks wherever you get your podcast, but especially on iTunes, whether or not you like it. I've not asked for it in a while, so maybe if this is your first time or if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't done it yet, head over and do that. Follow us on Twitter as well at Hardwood Knocks. We can also be found on YouTube, a channel that is growing, and I swear, probably some point over the offseason, we'll actually have video with mine and Adam's faces gleaming on it. Let's talk NBA draft lottery, though. Pistons win the first pick. They get Cade Cunningham. I know there's already a report that it's not a done deal. Cade Cunningham is going to the Detroit Pistons. That is a no-brainer at this point. Rolling through the order really quickly, 2 is Houston, 3 is Cleveland, 4 is Toronto, 5 is Orlando, 6 is Oklahoma City Thunder, 7 is Golden State, 8 is Orlando, that comes via the Bulls, 9 is Sacramento, 10 is New Orleans, 11 is Charlotte, 12 is San Antonio, 13 is Indiana, and 14 is, again, Golden State. And remember, the 7th pick for Golden State, that came via the Timberwolves. Immediately, a bunch of things stand out. And I'm not going to ask questions only about necessarily the lottery, but that's really where this geared towards. The Raptors jumping up to 4, not this huge leap. I believe they had the 7th best odds going into the lottery. What are they going to do with that pick? And you can look at prospect stats. I have not delved deep enough into my draft prep work to say, oh, they should target this player. I'm just much more curious as to what this will do to inform their direction. I'm assuming they're going to end up with Jalen Suggs, seems to be the consensus number 4, him or Jalen Green. I think a lot of people have Evan Mobley mostly going 2 or 3, and so I would guess that Jalen Green or Jalen Suggs falls to Toronto. My gut would say you keep that pick, which is fine, but are you keeping that pick, bringing in Jalen Green or Jalen Suggs, and keeping Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby and just being good enough to win now? Maybe, because that's the setup that you're in. I still just sort of wonder if this could potentially push the Raptors towards more of a gradual rebuild. I would like to see them bring Kyle Lowry back if he's willing to return, and assuming they're going to play in Toronto next season, because I think they could be super competitive while bringing along a top 4 pick. This isn't a Golden State Warriors situation where they're just kind of barren after their top guys. There's real depth there. If you look at a healthy Chris Boucher, Malachi Flynn looked really good towards the end of the year. They also have, we already mentioned Siakam, Anunoby, Fred VanVleet. That team is just, it's deeper. And I think that they could straddle those 2 timelines if they really wanted to. The other scenario would be, do you go nuclear and maybe dangle that 4th pick in a trade? Because This is considered like a 4-star potential draft, it sounds like right now. I can't believe I didn't even just mention Gary Trent Jr., who was also a restricted free agent. And so just all those pieces together. And then even like Utah Watanabe showed just a ton during the regular season. Could you dangle that pick? Would you be willing to trade number 4 in this draft for Bradley Beal if you think he's going to re-sign? I mean, there's other moving parts to that deal. You're probably looking at Bradley Beal and number 4, maybe another pick, 2023, could be because it postdates, as of now, his free agency. If Washington says yes to that and Beal says that he's going to re-sign or he's willing to re-sign, you could bring back Kyle Lowry. Fred VanVleet is big time for the Raptors, make no mistake. He probably could have made all defense this year. He definitely should have gotten more all defense consideration. I did not have him on one of my 2 teams, but he was among my honorable mentions. So losing him is big. He was also their lottery representative, so I guess that's kind of weird. But if you wanted to, that is a route you could go now with the 4th pick. And so I think it just opens up these different avenues where it's a high enough pick where you could look at it as essentially the future of your franchise, and maybe you're not as inclined to move. Fred VanVleet, still 26. You could look at him as young enough to do a quasi reset. Fred VanVleet turned 27. That's my mistake. You have OG Anunoby, definitely young enough there. Do you maybe look at shopping Pascal Siakam at that point because you're the number 4 pick? You're not drafting someone in all likelihood that you think is going to end up replacing him. And he, at 27 as well, like, isn't super old. It's just, I feel like before, if they were going to end up in 7th and you were not going to have one of these top 4 picks, it was more cut and dry where it's right, just bring in the prospect and then it's not going to be determining. You probably have him, try and groom him, bring him along slowly, tread water somewhere in the middle. It feels like there could be 3 more significant decisions where it's let's bring back Kyle Lowry and Gary Trent Jr. and be a lot better than expected if we were keeping the band together because we have this higher upside rookie. Do we use this pick? Would be another option to try and bring in some win now talent. We don't know which stars are going to be available. There's always ones that pop up. I think with a top 4 pick though in this year's draft, I'd give it up for Zach LaVine personally. I don't know if I'm doing that. Yeah, I'd probably do it if I'm the Raptors. I'm not giving up as much for him as I would for Bradley Beal, but those are 2 guys that feel like they have feasible paths to being on the auction block. I'm sure the star market will develop beyond that. Or the third scenario would be, do you look at this and say, all right, we have like a real building block here now, and maybe it's better if we go through a more gradual rebuild, and we're going to be willing to shop some of our older guys. Let Kyle Lowry walk, maybe look at Siakam and Fred VanVleet trades, and consider the core, whoever it may be to them. Is it Malachi Flynn? But it's definitely OG Anunoby, and then again, in my estimation, a Jalen Suggs or a Jalen Green, maybe even Gary Trent Jr., who is 23. My next question, obviously, would be what's going to happen with the Golden State Warriors, number 7 and 14. Like, those are good picks to have. You have Stephen Curry. You have Klay Thompson coming back. You have Draymond Green. You have Andrew Wiggins. Your window is now. And I think you have an obligation to continue trying to win so long as Stephen Curry exists. You need to shop these picks. And I think the problem with not jumping in with even one of these selections into the top 4, and they only could have kept Minnesota's pick if it was 4th because it was top 3 protected, so had it gone any higher, it would have stayed with Minnesota. But not having that top 4 pick really hurts them in trade talks because I don't think if you want to get Zach LaVine or if you want to get a Bradley Beal, and I'm not saying those are the only guys out there, they seem like they are most likely to be available. You're going to also have to attach James Wiseman and then other stuff as well. And then now you're also in this issue of, because the cap holds are lower on these rookies than they would have been had they been in the top 4, you're going to have to include other salary in these bigger deals. The Warriors don't have excuse me, I'm exhausted. I'm recording this at 4:40 in the morning Eastern time, but the Warriors do not have those mid-end salaries to attach into these trades. They have Steph is making 45.8 if we're looking at next year's salary. Klay is at 38 about. Andrew Wiggins is at 31.6. Draymond is at a cool 24. And then it drops off from there, where James Wiseman, as of right now, is actually their 5th highest paid player at 9.2. Kevon Looney is 6th at 5.2. He has a player option. So a lot of the things they do, if it's a Beal trade, just because Beal's salary next season is 34.5, you're either looking at, okay, Andrew Wiggins has to be included, or we're doing an Oubre sign-in trade. If you were going after a Zach LaVine, who I maintain is a good fit for this roster, a little bit more workable just because you have his $19.5 million salary, which is super low. So you can get away with Wiseman, Looney, then using this the number 14 pick, and you also have the number 7 pick, like using those as actual salaries. Trading them, you can come to an agreement whenever, we know how this works, but trading them 30 days after they sign their contract, and then other stuff. I just feel like the other stuff has to be more significant now because you didn't jump in the lottery. I honestly don't know what the Warriors will do. My guess would be that they probably don't make any significant splashes just because they seem to be very confident in their ability to develop these players. I don't know that they can do that while also juggling the attempt to reopen their title window. But they also have a low maintenance superstar in Steph where he has his 3 titles, he has his 2 MVPs. It's not that he doesn't want to compete, but he might be okay with, I want to be a Warriors lifer, and he's not going to try and force their hand by using the threat of his free agency in 2022. By the way, he's extension eligible now, so he could say he won't sign one and that he'll leave. That would be wildly out of character, and that would just be absurd. So I don't know what players will be available again, though. That's what this comes back to, and it's sort of the same question with the Raptors too. Although the Warriors, there's more urgency there. It feels like there's more doors open for the Raptors because they don't have that top 5 player right now. You have, Siakam or Fred VanVleet. Like, those are guys that I think Siakam probably peaks as like, or already has peaked as like that top 20, top 25 guy. And then last season, he sort of dropped off after that. But for the Warriors specifically, shop the pick, plural, and other stuff. And you have to, I think now you're more likely, what does that other stuff look like? James Wiseman and number 7 would be my guess, are probably the 2 main attractions that are included in any deal. Whereas if you had a top 4 pick, maybe you get away with not including number 14 or not including Wiseman or not giving up as many future picks. And look, if I'm a team, I know front offices don't think this big picture because they don't have that type of job security. But if I'm a team, I'm looking at the Warriors' long-term future, the age, Klay Thompson, Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, all on the wrong side of 30. Yes, you could be sending them a really good player now, but unless you're sending them someone like who's super young, like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was a trade target I suggested for the Warriors, or if Karl-Anthony Towns decided he went out of Minnesota, again, I'm not saying he would, but someone who's like 25 or younger, you start looking down the line. Golden State owes a 2024 pick to Memphis. It's loosely protected, assuming it conveys. You go out to 2026, 2027. Shorting their future is not the dumbest decision in the world because there's a chance that they might just be bad by that point. So if you can get some looser protections on that and you're in a position where you're going to make a move anyway, I don't think that's a bad asset. And what the Warriors can also do is by waiting to complete deals before the end of this draft, you can get this year's picks from them and then also 2022. So that helps as well. And look, we've seen teams. You look at New Orleans with Drew Holiday and New Orleans with Anthony Davis and Houston with James Harden. They've taken these far out future picks. It feels like these hauls for top, say, 25 guys. Drew Holiday's probably right on the fringes of that. They're getting bigger. And it's a lot of it is because these are contenders that are going after these bigger names. The Warriors are in a similar boat where, yeah, if they got a Bradley Beal, I don't know that they're as threatening as the big 3 in Brooklyn. Overall, though, you expect them to be good in the interim. And so those future picks, and yes, the immediate ones because they have lottery in this case, which Milwaukee didn't. The Lakers did have the lottery pick. Them jumping up into that DeAndre Hunter territory ended up helping out their trade package a great deal. That helps the Warriors' immediacy, but you do have to look at that down the line value. And I'm just very curious to see what winds up happening with their offseason. I'm also looking at teams that are, I probably say this every year, so I do not want to say that I think there are teams with more accelerated windows that are in the lottery. That's probably a thing I could say every single season. But you look at like Sacramento at 9, even New Orleans at 10, Charlotte at 11, the Spurs at 12, and the Pacers at 13. Like, those are 5 teams that I would assume have semi-immediate aspirations. The Spurs, I think, are the wildest card there, just because Greg Popovich is 72, and as long as he's in San Antonio, my guess would be that they don't go full tilt into a rebuild. They did hand out second contracts to DeJounte Murray and Derek White already. At the same time, they're at that natural reset point where you have DeMar DeRozan, Patty Mills, and Rudy Gay entering free agency. You already got rid of LaMarcus Aldridge. You can get, I think, I have them pegged at nearly $50 million in cap space if they want to max it out. So that's a ton of money that you don't want in this year's market. And so do you maybe prioritize taking on bad contracts that are going to be attached to other picks? Is that market even going to be booming when teams aren't trying to clear money necessarily for this summer? Or do you go the other route and say, well, we have this money, we're going to spend big on free agents? My point being, it would be uncharacteristic for the Spurs to make a trade or move out of number 12. But if there's still that push to make the playoffs, could that be in play? The Kings are another wild card because it feels like they're sort of in crap or get off the pot mode right now. They're so stuck in the sub-middle of the NBA that they need to pick a direction. Do you look at selling off Harrison Barnes, Buddy Hield? How much does Richaun Holmes' price tag factor into that decision? They have only early bird rights on him. And so effectively, I don't want to lose anybody in the salary cap minutia, they can pay him either around the league average salary or they have to dip into cap space. And so my guess would be that he goes for more than between $10 or $11 million, which is what they would be allowed to pay him before dipping into cap space. They don't have cap space right now, so you need to clear money. And if he leaves, you're a substantially worse team because he was there on balance, I would say second best player overall last year behind De'Aaron Fox. That was the only one that I look at who's better. Maybe Tyrese Halliburton has stretches of more impact. So do you lean into a rebuild and say, hey, we're just going to rejigger this around Fox, Tyrese Halliburton, we'll see who we get at number 9 as well. Maybe Marvin Bagley showed hints of outside shooting again last year and sort of perked up at points. Do they view him as part of the core? Or do you maybe move number 9 and try and make that all-ish in play that we've seen Phoenix make when they went after Chris Paul? They didn't give up this huge ransom. It was a matter of great opportunity for them. But if you want to be competitive and keep Harrison Barnes, don't want to get rid of Buddy Hield, if you actually want to be a playoff threat in the West, you got to stop existing in this sub-middle. You have to pick one way or the other. And so of these 5, we're looking at Indiana, San Antonio, Charlotte, New Orleans, and Sacramento. My guess would be Sacramento is the most likely to move the pick. I view them as a little bit less of a wild card for San Antonio because I can never read San Antonio, and most league insiders can't read San Antonio either. They just operate in total mystery. I would be curious to see what Sacramento could build with the number 9 pick. I don't view Marvin Bagley necessarily as a net positive asset right now, but if you're intrigued by what he can do in the open floor, surrounded with enough spacing, he does have an interesting floor game. If you do believe that he can knock down standstill jumpers on long twos and even from 3, then yeah, his value butches up a bit. Could be something like, let's say, number 9, Marvin Bagley, Robert Woodard, and then a lotto protected 2022 first for Jonathan Isaac. I think that level of player would be who they're looking at. I don't know that they can get into a big wig conversation, nor do I know that they need to. What is Bradley Beal doing for the league's worst defense last season? They have De'Aaron Fox, they have Tyrese Halliburton. Yeah, he really ups your offense. I mean, if Bradley Beal said he wanted to come to Sacramento via trade, but I don't know that they would be a team where I say Toronto or Golden State should go after Zach LaVine. While LaVine is very good, I don't know that I would encourage Sacramento to do that. I think they either need to target guys that are more two-way impact players or who really just move the defensive needle, like a Jonathan Isaac, where Orlando has just ushered in the rebuild. And yes, they have the Chicago's pick at number 8 in addition to their own at number 5. They landed at, would they be willing to take on a third? Can they move 9 and 8 or 9 and 5 or 8 and 5 to try and move up? Which teams in the top 4 would even consider moving out of their spots? I don't know that any of them would. So there's moving parts there. I am curious to see what the Pelicans entertain doing. They probably just end up keeping this pick, but they do have some money that could stand to be moved off their books if they want to keep Lonzo and Josh Hart, and dangling number 10 to get off of Steven Adams or Eric Bledsoe. While bad form on its own, maybe that's the ticket to building deals where you're actually bringing back positive value or impact players, and you're not just washing off money. Indiana, again, a team that feels like they should want to win soon. You look at that potential 5-man lineup of Turner, Sabonis, Warren, Karis LeVert, and Malcolm Brogdon, didn't log a single minute together this past season. They could be really impactful. That's a nice, well-balanced team. It does feel like there's going to be some roster turnover there, whereas the offseason they finally break up the big man duo of Sabonis and Turner. My guess would be that they trade Turner. Are you packaging him? How are you viewing that deal? Are you trying to divest him into multiple maybe role players and while lessening your payroll so that you can afford to bring back TJ McConnell and Doug McDermott without dipping into the tax? Or are you going to lean the other way? And is it, Miles Turner and throwing number 13 out there and seeing what that can get you, maybe in addition to some other stuff? You do have Aaron Holiday, Jeremy Lamb's salary makes for good matching fodder. So I'm so fascinated with a lot of those end of lottery teams. And one of my overarching questions for the draft this year is, let's start here. Let's get one more team specific question before I look at the bigger picture, maybe even two more. Chicago. This was a disaster for them. They had the top 4 protected pick they owed to Orlando. It's obviously conveying because it's going to number 8. You make that deal. I don't want to hear that this was about kind of moving past this season. You make that deal this season because you wanted to make the play-in tournament. I know missing Zach LaVine, I can't remember the moment. I think he had COVID, but he missed a couple weeks. That ended up hurting you. I understand that happened, but you missed the play-in, and then you sent out the 8th pick to Orlando. Yeah, you still have Vooch, but you didn't need him towards the end of this season because you didn't make the play-in. That was the whole point of that trade. And now, what's your avenue towards improving this roster? You can get some cap space, but you're not going to have a ton unless you waive the partial guaranteed deals of Thomas Satoransky, who's partially guaranteed $5 million, and then Thaddeus Young, who's partially guaranteed $6 million. And I don't know why you'd want to pay Thaddeus Young to go away when he can still be an impact defender for you, and even Thomas Satoransky to provide you with some secondary ball handling. And if you do carve out cap space, are you going to look at renegotiating and extending Zach LaVine before you look at trying to add talent? Yes, you can wait until, one, he's not signing an extension. It's going to be a renegotiate and extend where he can immediately increase his salary next season, what you need cap space to do, or he's going to wait to 2022 free agency where he will have max offers. And that's why you're not going to sign an extension that could only give him 120% raise off of that $19.5 million number next year, because he has the ability to make more than $10 million more than that as a starting salary in free agency. And if you don't renegotiate and extend him with your cap space, you risk losing him for nothing in 2022 free agency. It's really just that simple, assuming you keep him, because there's a chance you make the playoffs. The East is still open in that way. There's also a chance that you flame out during those playoffs, or you don't make those playoffs at all. And he just has eyes for another franchise. There will be teams with max room, teams that are better, closer to competing for a title or just going deeper into the playoffs. You really need to have a feel for what he's thinking. You also need to weigh the cost of renegotiating and extending him now, because if you clear cap space to do that, that's your move. You haven't brought back Larry Marketing unless you somehow just cut a ton of money elsewhere. You're not making any of these other big time moves. You're not using cap space to sign guys who really help you. You're limited then to using the room exception as opposed to the mid-level exception. And so you're losing that spending tool or the ability to operate as an over-the-cap team if you need cap space to renegotiate and sign LaVine. Is this Bulls team, as presently constituted, with a healthy Zach LaVine and Vooch, are they guaranteed to make the playoffs? And in that scenario, I'm assuming if you renegotiate and extend Zach LaVine, Larry Markkinen is not back. I just honestly don't know. And so that's a team to watch, just because I don't think this has to be a matter of Zach LaVine asking for out. I think the Bulls, after that Vooch trade, are now confronting awkward realities following their failure to make the play-in tournament. And maybe this is all, maybe they go the other direction too. You still have Kobe White. You have future draft equity if you're willing to trade out beyond your 2023 pick, pending that obligation to Orlando. You have Patrick Williams, who I would not suggest moving. I thought he was spectacular, and it ended up providing good value for someone who was drafted at 4th, basically out of nowhere. Everyone was shocked by that pick. Do you try and package those together to take another swing? Again, I don't know who the player is that you're going after, but you are sort of pot committed to this core in the sense that you already tried to win now. The other thing for me, the final team specific question is the Oklahoma City Thunder. So they went into this with like a fairly good chance of having 2 top 4 picks, and you left with 0 top 4 picks. You still have 3 first round picks, but 6, 16, and 18 just aren't as sexy. I feel like they're going to be active on draft night. Do they use 16 and 18 to move up? What can they move from there? Like, what is the team that's looking to divest into 2 picks? Like, is Indiana so concerned at their tax bill they would give you 13 for 16 and 18? Is that even worth it if you're Oklahoma City? They have so many picks moving forward. They're going to have some roster spot issues, and they might want to add talent via free agency. I think you have to bet against that, just looking at how many players they're already going to have projected to be on the roster next year. But it feels kind of unlikely that they're going to keep all 3 of those picks. Maybe one of them or 2 of them even as a draft and stash. That's always a possibility. But they're just a team to watch at this point. And they're projected to have a boatload of cap space this summer still. The Kemba Walker trade impacted that a little bit. But like, this is a team where if you're announcing all your own free agents, and this is while keeping like non-guaranteed deals for Kendrick Williams, Gabriel Deck, and Lou Dort, you can still get $37+ million in cap space. So if they want to take on money, they can do that. I've also wondered how they're going to handle the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander extension situation. It's either max him now, max him in restricted free agency, or do you think about maybe trading him to see what he can fetch? And the fact that you don't have those 2 high-end first-round picks now, does that make it more likely? Because you could look at some of those other teams, and while the Raptors among the top 4 squads are the only ones that can be billed as win now, I don't know. Detroit, not interested in Shai. Houston, I would guess, isn't interested in Shai. Cleveland, having Sexton and Garland, they're probably not interested in Shai, but Toronto, or Orlando, it's just, or even look, Golden State, using 7 and just throwing them. You use 7 and Wiseman. Like, does that get you in the conversation for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, knowing he's extension eligible? Is that something that the Thunder do? I'm not saying that they should. I want to make this clear. I would pay Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think he is a monster, and you just look at the improvement he made this season as being the primary engine of an offense and the efficiency that he carried. And he was almost 90% of his looks went unassisted, one of the highest shares in the league. So he is special, but he does have that plantar fascia issue. And while I'm not advocating for teams to save money, maxing out someone when you're still kind of so early in this rebuilding process, it can get a little bit awkward. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is probably so young that it maybe doesn't matter to them. He is 22. He turns 23 in July. So, but the Thunder are just always a team to watch at this point. They already traded for Kemba Walker. Finally, overall, the question would just be, like, what type of trade activity are we going to see on draft night? As I already mentioned, Oklahoma City has 3 first-round picks. The Houston Rockets have 3 first-round picks. Sort of the product of these superstar trades is it feels like these draft picks have been condensed. And there are teams that need to win now where, they could agree to trades on draft night and then push the deal through when they're no longer future picks. So the Clippers can trade number 25. The Nuggets can trade number 26. The Sixers, number 28. Brooklyn can technically trade number 27. Utah can trade number 30. We're going to see contenders be like sort of aggressive? Because I already mentioned like those back end of the lottery teams. What are they going to do? The Lakers, number 22, that feels like a potential chip that could be used where if they're trying to land a bigger name or even help themselves complete an eventual sign and trade, but that's not something you could figure out until free agency starts legally. Anyway, the Knicks have 2 first-round picks, number 19 and number 21 from Dallas. Is there a way to move up with those 2? How many spots are you jumping up? Like, is Washington giving you 15 for 19 and 21? Is that even worth it? And if you're the Knicks, you also have to weigh, having 2 first-round picks might not be just a bad idea because, yeah, you're good. You were really good this season. You still have to, and we'll talk about this in a few moments, there's the issue of sustainability there, and you do need to still be in talent acquisition mode. maybe you get lucky and find, an Emmanuel quickly type impact player in one of those picks. You're giving yourself two bites at that middle to the end of the first round apple to nab someone who could be part of next season's rotation, which is important. You're not looking for a 10 pull star prospect. They don't have one of those. RJ Barrett comes pretty close. He's their best chance at having one. I do think he's a legitimate option there. We just need to see what he looks like with more on ball reps as a creator for himself on off the dribble jumpers and as an initiator for others. But there feels like we could be set up to see a bunch of action on draft night towards the latter end of the draft. I don't know, looking at the top, if we'll see as much. That might just hinge on the Warriors and how aggressive they're going to be on the trade market. And maybe that's just not something we even see until later on in the offseason that develops. But those, at number 7, it's less of a consensus there. So you probably want to be making sure that you're picking for the team that you're eventually completing a trade with. But just teams that have those multiple firsts, Oklahoma City with 3 total, 2 outside the lottery, the Knicks with 2 outside the lottery, the Rockets with 3 in total and 2 outside the lottery, and then just those contenders. Feels like we might be set up to see a lot of movement on draft night, the type that you can't really see coming, the deals that are going to come out of the woodwork.